Good morning. So my topic assigned to me today are some of the challenges that the NGO sector faces. And before I start getting into the challenges, I just want to thank everybody who's involved in the sector. It doesn't matter what your contribution is, whether you're a donor or somebody in the support services role. I want to thank you for the work that you do, because the NGO sector is almost like this invisible thread that weaves its way through the society of South Africa doing good. And it's a very good friend of mine, Alana James, who once said, could you imagine a world where all NGOs just closed their doors, even if it was for 48 hours, what the impact of that would be. But we do have challenges. I think some of the biggest challenges that the NGO sector faces is the lack of international funds coming back into South Africa now. I think South Africa is no longer seen as the destination that's in need of help. I think a lot of donors have got their focus on other countries who have more prominent or well-documented cases of need. I think another big challenge is that we are not, as the NGO sector, educating our donors about the programs that we do and the impact that we have. And that leads me to sort of the second challenge that the NPO sector faces, and that is, I think a lot of NPOs and NGOs are very focused on sort of short-term projects and don't have an answer to the question of what is your long-term program that looks towards community sustainability or social sustainability and development. And then also, how do we measure the impact of the work that we do? I think there's very little measurement of impact. So a lot of the work that we do with donors is to appeal on a more anecdotal basis. And I feel that if we had more scientific approach or a more impact-focused approach with our donors, that donors would then understand why it's so important to support the NGO sector. Another very big problem is that the NGO sector is desperately fragmented. And by that I mean, and this is just by way of example, you might have a 20 square kilometer radius with about 4 or 5 rehabs in that space who are not speaking to each other. And yet if all of them came together and started speaking to the ward council about what some of the requirements would be and were willing to cooperate with each other in terms of approaching donors for funding, that would have a very different impact for donors because they would be able to have a far greater reach, and they would be working with a lot more rehab centers in my example. So I do feel that if we had a stronger voice, if we were more connected, if we were speaking to each other, if there was a higher level of cooperation, we could have a very strong voice challenging business and challenging government. Business has BUSA as an example, government has SALGA as an example, platforms where everybody comes together and talks to each other. I'm not quite sure that the civil society sector has a strong enough unified voice to influence legislation when it impacts so greatly on us. And then, of course, I also think that some of the other challenges that the NGO sector has is the lack of compliance. Compliance is so important. Governance measures and putting good governance measures in place. Audits, audited financials, those levels of compliance are so important because it creates a level of trust between sector and donors. Because donors will know that we take the accountability and responsibility we have associated with receiving their donation. We take that very seriously, and so we are able to account and be responsible for it in a very meaningful way. Thank you very much.